How to prevent the most common running injuries. See, running is more than a sport, it's a way of life. And it clears your mind, it strengthens your body, fuels your soul. But for 80% of runners every year, unfortunately, this joy is interrupted by injuries that force them to slow down, seek medical attention, or stop altogether. Here's reality though. Running isn't inherently dangerous. And no, it doesn't ruin your knees or lead to more arthritis than non runners. Actually, studies have shown that recreational runners have the same arthritis rate as non runners. The truth is, most running injuries are preventable, though. The key lies in understanding common mistakes and taking the right steps to address them. Whether you're a seasoned marathoner or a beginner logging your first miles, this guy's going to help you avoid the most common running injuries and keep moving pain free. So, one, you just got to know what these common injuries are. So, the five most common running injuries that strain the body and are typically involving the knee. Right, the knee's actually accounts for like 42% is the of injuries that happen to the runner. In the knee, you got the patellofemoral pain syndrome, runner's knee, and then IT band, iliotibial band syndrome. Excuse me. And then we got shin splints, medial tibial stress syndrome, and Achilles tendinopathy, and plantar fasciitis. So on average, every foot strike can deliver impact forces 2 to 3 times your body weight. For a 150-pound runner, that's 300 to 450 pounds of force landing on each foot strike. These repetitive stresses can sometimes lead to injuries. The good news is most of these injuries typically result from training errors, and with the right strategies, they're entirely preventable. So prevention made simple. Preventing running injuries isn't just about avoiding, running altogether, right? And it's funny. I've talked to trainers. I used to be a personal trainer myself. They'll say, "Oh, running is just a dangerous sport." Even a lot of doctors, they tell their patients, "Just stop running. You're an older adult. You're in your 40s. Just stop running." But it's not about running. Stop. Especially if you love running or you run for your conditioning. There's no reason to stop running altogether. For most folks, even if you're in your 40s, 50s, etc., you can still continue running. It's about running smarter, not harder. So the most effective strategies to keep yourself injury free and enjoying your run. So I'm going to share that below. So number one, avoid too much, too soon, too fast trap. Right, you probably heard of this, and if you haven't, here it is. Right, one of the biggest culprits behind running injuries is doing too much too soon. For example, jumping from like 10 miles one week to 25 miles the next week. You might think, hey, you're making great progress, but that's a fast track to overuse injuries. So instead of just having random increases whenever you feel like it, follow like the 30% rule. So you probably heard of the 10% rule if you're an experienced runner, but the research has shown it's not really about the 10% rule. It's actually 30% rule. So don't increase your weekly miles more than 30%. So keep it under 30%, right? So, because if you think about it, if you're a beginner runner and you go from, 10 miles to 13 miles, right? That's not that big of a jump. But if you're more of a seasoned runner, you're already running 90 miles a week and you go to 99 miles. So technically that's 10% for that 90 to 99 miles, but that's the volume, the impact of the body is already taking 90 miles per week of mileage that impacts stress on the body. And then adding 9 miles on top of that is going to be a lot of extra volume and load on the body compared to the runner who's just doing 10 miles to just 13 miles. So, follow this rule. You'll help you decrease the too much. The other trap is just trying to go too hard or too fast. A lot of times runners will do too hard, too fast. I mean, they try to do all their run workouts, the red line, going too fast all the time. So follow an 80-20 split, especially if you train like 5 days a week. So if you train 5 days a week, 4 out of the 5 days should be like easy runs, right? And then that one day could be a moderate to harder intensity run. So like the 80-20 rule. And, this is going to help monitor the too fast issue of going too fast. And then we were talking about the too much with the high mileage. And then if you're a beginner runner, also monitoring the too soon, like don't jump right into marathon training right from the couch if you've never even run a 5K, right? Be able to walk a 5K, then you could, go from walk to walk run and, run a 5K. But don't go from, hey, you've never ran a day as in your adult life and then think, oh, I'm just going to run a marathon next week from, working at a desk job where you're sitting like 8 to 10 hours a day and not doing any running at all. So, gradually build up your body's tolerance in a smart way, and then you'll be fine that you can decrease your risk of injury. Because unfortunately, a lot of beginner runners who end up training for a marathon end up getting hurt. Next, strength and mobility training is non-negotiable. So a lot of runners think that it's just an afterthought. Oh, it's nice to do strength training, or maybe I'll do some flexibility training, but it's actually a game changer for injury prevention. So weak muscles or limited flexibility can put extra strain on your joints and tendons and ligaments, leading to pain and overuse. So for strength training, incorporate strength training at least twice a week. Focus on key muscles like the quads, hamstrings, glutes, and then, even if you're pressed for time, right, doing a 20 to 30 minute single set routine to muscle fatigue can make a giant difference. That's actually what I recommend for like most runners. Just do a single set to training, a single set to failure, a single set to muscle fatigue for full body. And you'll find that, hey, you'll get a great workout and you have to spend, so many hours in the gym. Now, if you had a prior injury, especially the knee, like the prior knee injury, you may actually want to consider upping your training frequency to like 3 to 4 days a week versus just 2 days a week. Because people with knee injuries tend to often have an imbalance, especially like quad weakness and residual weakness after the injury. It's funny. There's studies with ACL injury, for example. Even though these athletes may have had ACL surgery, they 2 years after the surgery continue to have weakness in their quad muscle. And as a physical therapist myself, I've actually noticed athletes who I worked with, like who are 5 years out from like a surgery or knee injury, still had residual weakness in their leg. And when I asked them, they just weren't doing enough strength training. Like maybe they did do some strength training, maybe like 1 or 2 times a week, but with the knee, especially with a past knee injury, oftentimes it actually has to be higher to 3 to 4 times a week to just have enough volume for your quads, because quads actually need a high volume strength training to actually be properly conditioned and trained properly so they're matched, because oftentimes it will be a left to right imbalance or asymmetry, and then you're going to put more weight on one side, then the weaker side doesn't catch up. So to offset that, just make sure you do enough volumes, which is 3 to 4 days a week, is particularly the lower body. Yes, you can do upper body, of course, but when we're talking about a knee injury, you can do things like leg press, leg extension, squats, lunges, step downs, etc. Also, mobility is very important. So daily mobility. Make sure you target tight areas with stretching or foam rolling. Many runners struggle with tight hip flexors. And so they think they could just do 30 seconds a few times during the runs a week. So they may do a 30-second stretch, but that's not enough. Actually, it should be like 3 minutes of, especially your tight areas. So if you're tightening your hip flexors, 3 minutes a daily of hip flexor stretching, for example. But that's not an example. You obviously going to pick the area that's tight for you. Maybe you have tight calves. Maybe you have tight foot, like your plantar fascia is very tight, the muscles in the bottom of your foot. So you have to stretch that. And if you prefer a longer routine, maybe you like doing yoga. So do yoga like 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe do an hour of yoga 2 or 3 times a week. You have a longer stretch routine. That can help as well to keep you nice and limber and flexible. Yes, I know there are some studies that show that flexibility training doesn't make a big difference. That strength training is more important. But from a clinical standpoint, just working almost 10 years as a physical therapist, I still notice that the stiffness can be a big issue in a lot of runners. And sure, flexibility in itself is not the only thing that you need. Yes, you need to compare that with strength training. Flexibility is still very important. I prioritize flexibility with myself and my athletes, make sure they do mobility and stretching and joint stretches and muscle flexibility stretches. And the other thing is also foam rolling or lacrosse ball. So like that's also a big thing in helping the tissues are nice and mobile and they're not too stiff. And that leads us into prioritizing recovery. So recovery isn't just a luxury, it's essential for growth and injury prevention. Skimping on recovery can increase your risk of overuse, injuries, and burnout. So a major thing, it always boggles my mind. It's like a lot of runners, they're like, oh, they'll run, they'll even spend money on these gadgets like the HyperIce boots to get like ice and compression massage, but they don't even sleep enough. The biggest recovery hack to just get enough sleep. Right, 6 hours a night won't cut it unless you're like an outlier. There's very few outliers out there who could survive on 6 hours of sleep. You need at least 7 hours of sleep every night, even up to 8 hours. It depends. Some people need 8, some people need 7, but don't kid yourself that you need 6. So very, very few people can get by with 6 hours of sleep. Yes, there's people who have a genetic advantage, but the average person is going to need like 7 hours of sleep to allow your body to repair, rebuild, and recover. And that's where you feel, hey, your legs are feeling fresh in between run workouts. If your legs are always feeling dead and heavy, it's probably you're just not getting enough sleep. Instead of trying to look for the latest recovery hack, just sleep enough hours. Another thing is a gradual comeback, especially if you take time off for running. A lot of people I live in New York, and a lot of runners will take time off during the winter. They'll have like a seasonal break from running where they take like 3 or 4 months off from running, and they go back into the spring or summer and think, oh, I'm just going to start running 5 or 6 days a week right away. And that's too much of a big jump. Actually, if you're the seasonal type of runner where you take the winters off, it's better off if you start with like 2 or 3 runs a week. That's essentially running every other day. You run every other day. And if you're coming from an injury, you may run every third day, right? If you had shin splints, you may run a run every third day. That way you give yourself like 2 days in between run workouts to allow yourself to recover. And then as your body adapts, maybe after the first month or two of going back to running, then you can think about going to like 4 days or 5 days a week or even 6 days a week if you really, enjoy running and you find that your body's able to recover properly. That being said, if your body's not recovering properly, maybe you're an older runner and you just need more days of recovery, that happens. And maybe genetic factors. There's many variables that come into play. Maybe you work a very stressful job. Maybe you spend a lot of time on your feet. So maybe you find that you could only run 3 days a week. That's totally fine. You can train for a marathon on 3 days a week. Don't believe that you need to train 6 days a week to like train for a marathon or a half marathon. You could train or maybe just enjoy running. You could just get the benefits of running just training 3 days a week. There's no reason to train 5 to 6 days a week. Yes, there's an exception if you're an elite runner and you're going for the gold, you're a champion runner trying to win first place. That's a different story. Yes, more practice can help you become a better runner. But if you find that you just need more recovery because you're an older runner, you tend to get hurt more often, you're more sore and achy, just have more recovery days built into your training schedule. So just run 3 days a week instead of trying to run 6 days a week. Very easy thing. But unfortunately, many runners are stubborn and think, oh, I need to run every single day of the week. That's not the case, especially if you keep dealing with reoccurring injuries. And also take genuine rest days. Don't confuse recovery with easy runs. This is another mistake I see a lot of runners make. They think, oh, I'll have I see elite runners, they do recovery days. They have an active recovery day where they do an easy run. But are you really recovering if you're doing an easy run? Sure, that elite runner can get away with it because their body's so elite that they can handle an easy run. And for them, it's like going for a walk. But for like beginner, even experienced runners, if you're not like an elite runner, I actually recommend just taking a recovery day. Just take the day off from running. Don't conflate. If you must get activity, do walking. Don't don't force yourself to do what you think an easy run as a recovery day. Keep an easy run separate from a recovery day. If it's a recovery day, switch to walking or stationary bike. Don't conflate an easy run as a recovery day, especially for beginners. Yes, if you're an elite runner, you're like a collegiate runner, you're a Division I runner, you're an athlete runner, yes, you can have recovery days that are active recovery with jogs or easy runs. But for the recreational runner, the weekend warrior, the beginner runner, or the experienced older runner, just swap the easy run for actual recovery day with like walking or biking or swimming to allow your body to recover. And if you must, you'll get the activity from the low impact of walking or biking or swimming. Next, let me go backtrack here. And if you need be, just take a complete day off of rest where you don't do any exercise. Like it's okay to just do minimal walking and just have a full day off. Don't feel the pressure that you need to keep running and running or doing some type of exercise. Don't be a workout junkie where you think you have to exercise 7 days a week. Next, fuel your body for success. So underfueling is another hidden factor behind many injuries, especially stress factors. While chasing peak performance, many runners restrict their calories too much. This undermines bone health and overall recovery. So here's a breakdown for proper fueling. One, you just want to make sure you're eating enough food, right? So you should feel well nourished. And if you're going to track macros like protein, carbs, and fats, so for protein, aim for anywhere from 0.65 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So a 150-pound runner, that's 100 to 150 grams of protein per day. Carbohydrates, especially if you're a distance runner, you're an endurance athlete, or you're running, 5K, 10K, half marathon, ultras, etc. You want to run for aim for 3 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per pound of body weight. So if you're a 150-pound runner, that's anywhere from 450 to 600 grams of carbohydrates a day. And I know that's a lot of carbs, especially if you're not used to eating that much to begin with. So you can start, you work your way up. It's the same way you train your running. You can train your gut to start taking more fuel. Fats, aim for 0.5 grams per pound of body weight per day. So if you're a 150-pound runner, that's 75 grams of fat per day. So things like, healthy fats, avocado, nuts. If you're into dairy products, sour cream, cheese. So just things that are healthy fats for you. And obviously, there might be some argument. What's a healthy fat? We're not going to go into that in this topic. You could do your own separate research on what are versions of healthy fats, healthy carbohydrates, healthy protein. I don't want to get into that for this video here. But anyways, just know that getting your food from whole foods, nutritious foods, minimally processed foods is recommended. So fruits and vegetables, lean meats, lean proteins. Proper nutrition ensures your body has a resource that needs to repair tissue, build strength, and withstand the impact. Because if you don't eat enough, you're actually at 4.5 times risk of bone injuries like stress fractures. So, make sure you're fueling enough. Next, listen to your body. Your body often whispers before it screams. So, oftentimes before you get injured, you actually will start developing tightness or stiffness in a certain area. If you're aware, you could actually recognize it's like, whoa, you're starting to get tight on one area, or like soreness on one area. It's actually a warning sign that you might be impending trouble. So treat these hot spots as warning signs. Think of it like the indicator light on a car. So dedicate at least 20 minutes of foam rolling to or stretching to that tight or hot area to address these early warning sign symptoms. So addressing these signs early can prevent small issues from escalating to major injuries. Further, use smarter training principles. So the belief that higher mileage always equals better results is a myth. You can achieve very good results like running a sub 3-hour marathon on a smart, focused training rather than ultra high mileage. Yes, if you're an elite runner, there's an exception for those 2-hour marathoners where they're super elite, and those elite runners may do like 100-mile weeks, 200-mile weeks. But I'm not talking about the elite of the elite who are winning, like who are crossing the finish line and breaking world records. I'm talking about the recreational runner who's still pretty fast. Hey, if you're a 40-year-old runner running a sub 3-hour marathon, that's still very impressive, and it can be done without having to do these ultra high mileage weeks. And remember that elite runners have a genetic advantage and also years of training on their side. A lot of elite runners come from places where they train like when they were 6 years old, where they had to run miles to get to point A to point B. That was just part of their daily life. Like to get to school, they had to run like 10, 12 miles just to get there and back. So just know that they had a big advantage compared to most adults who start running later in life, where they weren't part of teams. They didn't do like cross country running when they were in high school or college. And maybe they just started picking up running in their 30s and 40s. And that's okay, but don't think that you're gonna start doing really ultra high mileage now. You could build yourself up over the decades of running. Yes, if you really love running, you could build yourself up from like 30 miles a week, 60 miles a week, 90 miles a week. But that takes time. Don't think that's gonna happen, your first year of running, you're gonna go from like 30 miles to 100 miles a week. Sure, can you force yourself to do it? But it's not wise. It's going to be that same error of too much too soon. It's going to take years of training to build yourself up to super high mileage, especially if you're into like ultra running and things like that. So the runner's edge. Running comes with many challenges, but the rewards far outweigh the risks, especially if done smartly, intelligently. Right? Pay attention to your training. Log it. Use a log, especially if you're training yourself. Log like, hey, how much mileage you're doing week to week, and make sure you're not going over the 30% rule. Take a look at your recovery, do an audit of that, and your overall health and nutrition. And if you do this, you can prevent most common injuries and get the most out of your running experience. And you can optimize for your running goal, whether it's a marathon, half marathon, ultra marathon, etc. So if you take one thing away from this video, remember this: running injuries are often preventable. You don't have to be part of the 80% of runners who get hurt each year. Train smart, rest often, fuel well, and keep going. The road ahead is filled with possibilities, so stay strong. And if you need help with running, you're like, man, how do I do this and prevent injuries? Maybe you're dealing with an injury right now. Check the link I'm going to drop in the comments here and in the show notes here. I'll take you to, you can book a call with me and we can discuss ways we could help you prevent injury, or if you're already dealing with injury, how to overcome that running injury.